Welcome to Pages and Pots. This episode is about one of the most well-known and yet most mysterious women in the Bible, Zipporah, daughter of Jethro the Midianite. I hadn't planned to make this video, but one of my rabbi's sons, Yisrael, asked me to do it. In fact, his mother's name is Zipporah, and she is featured in my podcast under Conversations with the Rebbitzin. I couldn't say no, and I thought it was going to be easy. Zipporah was, after all, the wife of Moses. There had to be lots of information about her, right? Well, this was not the case. In fact, we know almost nothing about her at all. Zipporah was one of 7 sisters, the daughters of Jethro, a famous Midianite priest who was often found at the court of Pharaoh. Jethro's life would have overlapped the reigns of pharaohs such as Seti I, Ramses II, and perhaps even the time of Akhenaten's religious revolution. Jethro had fallen out of favor with his people for rejecting their cosmology of the local gods in favor of believing in the one true God. Could he have met the pharaoh Akhenaten and found truth in his message? We can only speculate. However, because he rejected the other gods of his people, he and his family were forced to live apart from the other Midianites. And what of Zipporah's 6 other sisters? What were their names? The Torah does not preserve them, and later rabbinic tradition is largely silent. Who is their mother? Jethro's wife? Again, the biblical text does not say, and the rabbinic sources are silent. In fact, all the Bible says about Zipporah is that she and her sisters had brought their sheep to a well where they were attacked by a group of shepherds. Sources such as the Ma'om Loes say that the men were attempting to rape them. Moses saw the attack and rushed to their assistance. He fought off the attackers and gained the attention of Zipporah. She convinced her father Jethro to give her to Moses as his wife. This all sounds reasonable. There are some contemporary authors who suggest that she was given away against her will, so let's examine this. The Midrash, which is the corpus of Jewish commentary that expands on biblical narrative, says that she sought after Moses and, in fact, ran up to greet him as though she had wings. So we know she was fit enough to run as well as strong enough to tend a flock of sheep. I think we can use some common sense to figure out what she was thinking. For example, she was the oldest of 7 sisters. A tall, well-groomed man wearing Egyptian clothing has rescued her. Moses appears to her strong, brave, a defender and a protector. We know he was raised in the court of Pharaoh, so he was also well-educated and mannered. So ask yourself, if Zipporah was a single woman living a semi-nomadic life in exile from her people, with her father, mother, 6 sisters, and servants, wouldn't she be interested in meeting a man like Moses? Possibly the only educated man who has come around for years? So it's not difficult to imagine why she would have noticed him immediately. By the way, we know nothing about her mother. Not even her name. Was she alive? Did Jethro have more than one wife? Again, the sources are silent. And even when Jethro later expressed the desire to follow Moses towards Sinai, we are not told whether he intended to bring his family with him. Zipporah's story is full of these unanswered questions. As for her parentage, in the book of Numbers, it specifically states that he married a Cushite woman. Some Midrashim took this to mean that she was dark-skinned, since Cush lay to the south of Egypt and Africa. But we're also told that she's Jethro's daughter and he was a Midianite. So we're left to wonder about her ethnicity. How can she be from the land of Cush and a Midianite? Perhaps Zipporah's mother, which we know nothing about, was from the kingdom of Cush, or perhaps an earlier branch of Jethro's family came from that world. But the sources are silent on this. The anonymous first-century author named Pseudo-Philo, credited for writing the text Biblical Antiquities, treats Zipporah as a Midianite, while the great rabbinic sage Ibn Ezra identifies the Cushite woman with Zipporah. and takes the term in a more literal, physical sense, saying she was dark-skinned, black like a Cushite. By contrast, Rashi, the 11th century biblical commentator who was often given preeminence in Jewish Orthodox decisions, says that Zipporah was called Cushite figuratively to emphasize her beauty. A passage in Moed Katan from the Talmud states that, but is her name Cushite? Zipporah is her name. Rather, just as a Cushite is distinguished by his dark skin, so too Zipporah was distinguished by her actions, and in some Talmudic passages states her beauty. In the Hollywood movie, she's definitely portrayed as Cushite, but that's a speculation from Cecil B. DeMille and based on an account by a Roman Jewish scholar named Josephus. Actually, that woman was Tharbis, the daughter of an Ethiopian king. We are told this story in Midrash accounts about how Moses had married Tharbis while in Ethiopia. That's a whole different discussion. But how could Tharbis be Zipporah? Do we follow the authority of Ibn Ezra, known for his literal interpretations, or that of Rashi and the Talmud, which suggests that she was Midianite? My best conjecture is that Zipporah may have come from a mixed background, Midianite through Jethro and perhaps Cushite through her mother, which leads us to even more interesting issues about her. You see, Zipporah was not a daughter of Jacob's tribal line. Most of Israel's great matriarchal figures are woven into the family structure of tribes through blood or marriage. But Zipporah stands out of this pattern. The closest comparison is Joseph's wife, Asenath, who, in the plain biblical reading, appears to be Egyptian, the daughter of Potiphar and his wife. Later Midrash, however, tries to draw her back into Jacob's family by identifying her as Dinah's child, conceived after Dinah's violation by Shechem, then miraculously carried away by an angel and placed in Potiphar's house with an amulet that would one day reveal her identity to Joseph. It's a fantastic story. But to me, it feels like an attempt to solve a problem after the fact and ask the reader to accept divine intervention, where the simpler reading is that Asenath, like Zipporah, came from outside the tribal bloodline. Therefore, Zipporah is best understood as part of the tribes of Israel through her marriage to Moses and as the mother of his sons. Zipporah had two sons with Moses, Gershom and Eleazar, both born before Moses left Midian to confront Pharaoh and lead the tribes of Israel towards freedom. At that stage, they were not yet Jews, in quotes, in the Sinai sense, but the descendants of Israel living under the earlier covenant of Abraham. This is also the point at which Zipporah steps into her most dramatic moment in the Torah. When God commanded Moses to return to Egypt, he set out with Zipporah, Gershom, and the younger child Eleazar. But along the way at a lodging place, the Lord, or in some interpretations, an angel, moved against Moses and threatened his life because Eleazar had not yet been circumcised. Realizing at once what was wrong, Zipporah took a flint and circumcised her son, thus saving her husband's life. Since this podcast is about Zipporah, I'm going to leave the speculation about the wrath of God to you, the listener. After Sinai, later Jewish traditions portrays Moses as withdrawing from marital relations with Zipporah in order to remain in a state of prophetic readiness. This returns us to the passage in Numbers where Aaron and Miriam are complaining to Moses about Zipporah. It's in this scene that we discover, through Midrash, that Moses had divorced her. Why does he do this? According to Jewish law, a husband and wife are obliged to have marital relations. Intimacy cannot be held back. But Moses had to be ritually pure to speak directly to God. The only way to follow the law and be the prophet of God was through divorce. Now, here's a point not found in the Midrashim or other exegetical texts. Did Zipporah remarry? She was an extraordinarily beautiful woman and a very capable head of household. I can imagine this is the reason that Moses passed over his sons to inherit his authority and gave that responsibility to Joshua. The Bible says that his sons did not have enough merit to accept the responsibility, but where was their father to give him this upbringing? This is pure speculation on my part, but given the roaring silence about Zipporah, aren't we allowed to wonder? We know nothing about her death and nothing about her during the wilderness journey to Canaan. We know very little about her sons as well, beyond their appearance in the genealogies of the Levites, where they are specifically named, but they're given almost no narrative life. In practical terms, Zipporah was almost certainly skilled in the work of nomadic life, pitching and striking tents, gathering fuel and wild foods, mending clothing and sandals, and caring for two young sons in a harsh environment. I mean, that's the life of a Midianite. As an outsider to the tribes of Israel, Zipporah may not have been fully at ease among the other women, though it is possible that she exercised a role somewhat like what we would call a Rebbitzin, a visible model of disciplined family life. But the truth is that we have no evidence that she was either a recognized female leader or someone deliberately pushed to the margins. Many non-rabbinic esoteric writers read Zipporah symbolically, and some go so far as to question whether she was a historical woman at all. For example, Rudolf Steiner treated Jethro's 7 daughters as figures for the 7 soul powers or rays of wisdom that poured into Moses at the well, while Helena Blavatsky argued even more directly that Zipporah was one of the personified occult sciences given to Moses by Jethro, and the well itself symbolized hidden knowledge. So it's left to you, the listener, to imagine the woman we know only through historical fragments. Did Zipporah make the right choice in marrying Moses? Did she bear the appearance of a Cushite woman? Did it hurt her that Moses, burdened by prophecy and leadership, had so little room left for an ordinary married life? And why was she left in the silence and shadows of the Bible and later rabbinic memory? I have done my best to give you the outline of her life. See, I imagine her as a quiet example to the women of Israel, strong, brave, beautiful, and tireless, fulfilling her role as wife and mother with modesty and dignity. And perhaps, like the generations of Rebbitzins who followed, she drew her identity not from recognition, but from service. Service to God, service to her family, and service to the mission carried by the greatest prophet of all time. Thank you for your patience as I indulged in my own speculation of the remarkable and mysterious life of Zipporah. You can help me by subscribing to Pages and Pods and also by giving me your speculations in the comments. Maybe I missed something.